The notification appeared on his Apple Watch while it charged beside the bathroom sink, illuminated against the marble countertop at precisely 6:43 a.m. Drew was in the shower, the glass door fogged with steam, his off-key humming of a song I'd come to recognize as a telltale sign of his anticipation. The sound of cascading water masked my footsteps as I approached, drawn by the device's soft glow. I wasn't looking for evidence. I wasn't searching for proof of what my intuition had been whispering for months. But there it was, an innocuous calendar alert synced from his phone. Weekend with O, Newport B&B, 3 p.m. check-in. Our 10th anniversary was in 2 days. For the past month, Drew had been talking about a special surprise he'd planned for our milestone celebration. He'd told me to block the entire weekend, to pack an overnight bag, to prepare for something unforgettable. And now I knew exactly what was unforgettable. He was planning to spend our anniversary with someone named O in Newport while I waited expectantly at home. If you're wondering how I reacted, what happened next might surprise you. I didn't scream. I didn't confront him immediately. I didn't throw his expensive watch across the bathroom or pound on the shower door demanding answers. Instead, I took 3 silent photographs with my phone. The notification, the details, the timestamp. Then I gently placed his watch back exactly as I'd found it and walked out of the bathroom. 10 years of marriage to Andrew Wilson had taught me one invaluable lesson. Intelligence trumps emotion every time. If you're enjoying this story so far, make sure to hit that subscribe button, because what happened next changed everything. Not just for me, but for how I would come to understand power, betrayal, and the unexpected strength that emerges when you're forced to rewrite your own story. The pivotal revelation. The thing about betrayal is that it never arrives announced. It doesn't send warning signals or ease you into its reality. It crashes into your life with the sudden force of a car accident, leaving you suspended in that strange moment between impact and pain. The moment where everything slows down and your mind processes details with crystalline clarity. Standing in our master bedroom, the plush carpet beneath my bare feet, I registered the crisp October light filtering through the plantation shutters, the framed wedding photo on the dresser, the faint scent of Drew's cologne lingering in the air. Our Beacon Hill brownstone, the home we'd painstakingly renovated together, suddenly felt like an elaborate stage set, beautiful but artificial, constructed to showcase a marriage that was apparently more performance than partnership. I picked up my phone and texted my assistant at Hamilton Investment Partners. Need to reschedule today's client meetings. Family matter. Then I sat at the edge of our king-sized bed and waited for Drew to emerge from the shower, practicing the expressions and responses of a wife who didn't know her husband was planning to spend their anniversary with another woman. When he walked out wrapped in a towel, water droplets clinging to his shoulders, I offered him coffee and asked about his day ahead. Back-to-back meetings until late, he said, kissing my forehead absently. The softcore acquisition is in its final stages. I might have to work through dinner again. On a Wednesday? I kept my voice neutral, curious. I thought things were slowing down before the weekend. Last-minute complications, he replied, selecting a blue tie that matched his eyes. You know how these tech deals go, unpredictable. I did know about unpredictability. I managed a $800 million investment portfolio for high-net-worth clients. What I didn't know, until that moment, was how convincingly my husband could lie while looking directly into my eyes. Don't forget we have dinner with the Prestons on Thursday, I reminded him, watching his reaction carefully. Right, of course. Looking forward to it, he answered smoothly. But I caught the momentary hesitation, the quick recalibration. Thursday was tomorrow. Our dinner with the Prestons was actually scheduled for next week. He was already mentally checked out, already with O in Newport. As he finished dressing, I noticed the slight spring in his step, the way he hummed that same tune as he packed his laptop. I might be late tonight, he said, straightening his collar in the mirror. Don't wait up. Good luck with the acquisition, I replied, my voice steady despite the hurricane building inside me. The door closed behind him, and I listened as his BMW pulled out of our driveway, the engine's purr fading as he drove toward next-gen technologies, or perhaps somewhere else entirely. Only when I was certain he was gone did I allow myself to feel the full magnitude of what I'd discovered. Not just the betrayal of an affair, but the calculated insult of planning it for our anniversary weekend. 10 years of building a life together, of supporting his career moves, of postponing my own ambitions when his needed priority, of working as a team toward shared goals, all of it suddenly reconfigured in my mind as I wondered how long this had been happening. How long had I been playing the role of devoted wife while he cultivated a parallel life? I took a deep breath, opened my laptop, and began to type a single word at the top of a blank document. Strategy. My grandmother, whose vintage watch collection sat in the safe upstairs, had always told me, when the ground shifts beneath you, plant your feet wider. It was time to establish my footing. I called the one person who would understand immediately without judgment. My sister Emma answered on the second ring. Something's happened, I said simply. I need a lawyer, a good one. Divorce. To her credit, Emma didn't gasp or exclaim. She didn't ask if I was certain or suggest marriage counseling. She simply said, Larry Cohen, I'll text you his number. He handled Diane's divorce last year. The husband never knew what hit him. Then she asked, Are you safe? Do you need me to come over? I'm fine, I answered, surprised to find it wasn't entirely a lie. Beneath the shock and hurt, I felt something unexpected taking root, a cold clarity, a strategic focus that felt almost like power. But I'll need a place to stay eventually. Not yet. I have things to handle first. My guest room is yours whenever you need it, Emma assured me. What did that bastard do? He's having an affair, planning to spend our anniversary with her this weekend. Emma's sharp intake of breath was followed by a string of expletives that would have shocked our conservative parents. The anniversary he's been hinting about for weeks? The big surprise? That's the one. What are you going to do? I looked out the window at the Boston skyline, the morning sun glinting off glass towers where money and power flowed through, digital channels where fortunes were made and lost based on timing and information. My world. Not Drew's tech bubble, but the financial realm where I'd built my reputation as a careful, insightful investment manager. I'm going to protect what's mine, I said finally, starting with our assets. After hanging up, I made a second call, this time to Vanessa Rodriguez, a private investigator who had helped one of my clients through a similar situation last year. Her directness had impressed me then. I need information, I told her after explaining the basics. How long, who she is, whether there are others, and especially any financial movements I should know about. Standard package, Vanessa replied. Matter-of-factly, I can start today. Retainer is $10,000, results guaranteed. Make it $15,000 for expedited service, I countered. I need preliminary findings within 48 hours. Deal, she agreed. Send photos, schedule, regular locations. The more I have to work with, the faster I'll have answers. By noon, I had appointments with both Larry Cohen and my personal financial advisor. I had forwarded Vanessa all the information I had on Drew's routines, regular haunts, and the mysterious O. I had systematically gone through our shared calendar, email accounts, and credit card statements, looking for patterns I might have missed. Our anniversary was in 2 days. Whatever Drew had planned with O in Newport, I was planning something far more consequential right here in Boston. The initial response. That first day passes in a surreal haze of practical actions and emotional containment. I moved through our home with new awareness, seeing it not just as the space we'd shared, but as an asset with a specific value, $2 million according to the most recent appraisal. The lake house in New Hampshire, $850,000. Our joint investment accounts, approximately $37 million. Retirement funds, insurance policies, stock options from Drew's position at Next Gen Technologies, all of it suddenly transformed from the foundation of our shared future to contested terrain in an impending battle. Larry Cohen's office offered a panoramic view of Boston Harbor, the October sun dancing on the water as sailboats cut white paths across the blue surface. The attorney himself was nothing like I expected, not the aggressive shark I'd imagined, but a thoughtful, soft-spoken man with intelligent eyes and a deliberate manner. "Tell me everything," he said after the preliminaries, "starting with what you want out of this situation." I considered his question carefully. What did I want? Revenge? Justice? Financial security? "I want what's fair," I said finally. "We built our life together. I've contributed equally, sometimes more when his company was struggling. I want recognition of that contribution, and I want protection from whatever he might try when he realizes I know." Larry nodded, making notes. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Massachusetts is an equitable distribution state, which generally works in your favor. The fact that you're a financial professional also helps. Judges appreciate parties who understand the nuances of complex assets. He looked up. But first, we need to establish the full picture. What evidence do you have of the affair so far? I showed him the photos I'd taken of Drew's Apple Watch notification. Not much yet, I admitted, but I've hired a PI, and I expect more concrete proof. Within days. Good, Larry said. Documentation is critical. In the meantime, we should discuss the prenuptial agreement, if there is one. There is, I confirmed, pulling the document from my portfolio. We signed it just before the wedding. Drew's parents insisted, as his family had some generational wealth they wanted to protect. Larry reviewed the document, his expression unchanging except for a slight raised eyebrow. "This is interesting," he said after a few minutes. Section 4.3 specifies that in case of infidelity by either party, the injured spouse is entitled to 60% of all marital assets, plus continued ownership of the primary residence. He looked up at me. "Did you read this clause before signing?" "Of course," I replied. I insisted on it. Drew's father had a history of affairs, and I wanted protection. Drew agreed immediately. He said he'd never be unfaithful, so the clause was irrelevant. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. "This changes our approach," Larry said, tapping the document thoughtfully. "If we can conclusively prove the affair, your position is significantly stronger." He hesitated. "However, I should warn you that men in your husband's position often don't respond well when cornered. We should prepare for aggressive tactics." I thought of Drew's ambition, his competitive nature, the way he approached business deals like battles to be won at any cost. "I'm counting on it," I said, "which is why we need to be 3 steps ahead." Larry studied me for a moment, then smiled slightly. "Most clients come in emotional, unfocused. You're different." "I manage risk for a living," I told him. "This is just another type of risk management." After leaving Larry's office, I met briefly with my financial advisor, instructing her to prepare a complete analysis of our joint assets and to flag any unusual transactions in the past year. Then I drove home, arriving just before Drew would typically return from work. I prepared dinner as I would on any normal Wednesday. Roasted salmon, asparagus, a bottle of the Sancerre he favored. I applied makeup to cover the dark circles under my eyes, changed into the casual elegance of jeans and a cashmere sweater that Drew once said brought out the green in my eyes. The perfect picture of a wife unaware that her marriage was built on quicksand. When Drew arrived home at 7:30, I greeted him with a kiss and asked about his day. He launched into a detailed account of the softcore acquisition challenges, his enthusiasm seeming genuine until his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, frowned slightly, and excused himself to handle one quick email. I wondered if it was her, if O was messaging to finalize their anniversary weekend plans. The thought should have wounded me, but instead, it strengthened my resolve. While Drew was distracted in his home office, I slipped into the master bedroom and placed a small device beneath his nightstand. A tracker Vanessa had provided that would allow us to monitor his movements more effectively than cell phone location. Data alone. Over dinner, Drew was attentive, even affectionate, complimenting the meal and asking about my day. I provided the edited version. Client meetings, portfolio reviews, nothing unusual. He mentioned the upcoming anniversary, his eyes bright with what appeared to be genuine excitement. "I can't wait for you to see what I've planned," he said, reaching across the table to take my hand. 10 years deserves something truly special. I smiled and squeezed his hand. "I'm looking forward to it," I replied, the words tasting bitter despite the sweet wine. 10 years is a significant milestone. After dinner, as we cleaned up together and practiced domestic harmony, Drew's phone buzzed again. This time, he didn't even excuse himself, just glanced at it and typed a quick response. "Martin needs clarification on the term sheet," he explained, naming his colleague at NextGen. I nodded, saying nothing. Later, as Drew showered before bed, I checked our joint credit card statement online. There it was, a charge from 2 weeks ago to Newport Bay Inn & Spa. Next to it, a charge for an expensive restaurant I didn't recognize, and another for a jewelry store in Providence. The anniversary surprise was taking shape in transaction records, each one a specific betrayal. I saved screenshots of each charge, emailed them to Larry and Vanessa, then cleared my browsing history and closed the laptop. When Drew emerged from the bathroom, I was already in bed, pretending to read. "Everything okay?" he asked, noticing my unusual quietness. "Just tired," I replied. "Big client presentation tomorrow." He nodded, seeming relieved at my simple explanation, and slid into bed beside me. As his breathing slowed into sleep, I lay awake, acutely aware of the stranger sharing my bed. This man I'd loved for a decade who had somehow become a carefully constructed facade rather than a partner. Tomorrow would bring more information, more evidence, more strategic positioning. For tonight, I needed rest and clarity. The anniversary countdown continued. 36 hours until Drew planned to leave for Newport with O. The clock was ticking on both his betrayal and my response. The adaptation period. Thursday morning arrived with a text from Vanessa. "Preliminary findings ready. Can meet at 11 a.m. Coffee shop on Newberry?" I confirmed while Drew was in the shower, then prepared to maintain the increasingly difficult charade of normalcy. Over breakfast, Drew mentioned a late meeting that evening. "The softcore team wants to review the final acquisition terms. Might go until 9 or 10. "Don't forget we have the Prestons tonight," I said, repeating yesterday's fabrication to test his reaction. Drew paused, coffee cup halfway to his lips. "The Prestons? I thought that was next week." "No, it's tonight," I insisted, watching him carefully. I confirmed with Diane yesterday. His brow furrowed in what appeared to be genuine confusion, then cleared. "You're right. I must have mixed up the dates. But I can't reschedule this meeting. It's crucial for the deal." "I understand," I said, hiding my satisfaction at catching him in the lie. "I'll make your excuses to them." "Thanks, Becca. You're the best." He kissed my cheek, grabbed his briefcase, and headed for the door. "I'll text when I'm wrapping up." After he left, I changed into a casual outfit that wouldn't attract attention and headed to my meeting with Vanessa. The coffee shop on Newbury Street was busy enough to provide anonymity, but quiet enough for conversation in a corner booth. Vanessa slid a manila folder across the table. Her name is Olivia Parker, 31, marketing director at Visual Path Media, which has been working with next-gen technologies on their rebranding for the past year. They met at a corporate retreat in March. I opened the folder to find photographs of a slender woman with auburn hair, elegant and professional in appearance. In one photo, she was entering the Weston Copley place with Drew, his hand resting possessively on the small of her back. In another, they were dining at an upscale restaurant, leaning toward each other in intimate conversation. The timestamps showed these were taken within the past week. 7 months, I murmured, calculating the timeline of their relationship. How often? Twice weekly, generally. Sometimes more. Always the same pattern. Late work meetings as the excuse. Hotel, rendezvous or dinners in discreet locations. They're not particularly careful, which suggests either confidence or carelessness. The Newport trip? Vanessa nodded. Confirmed. Reservation at the Newport Bay Inn and Spa, Harborview Suite, Friday through Sunday. Dinner reservations for 2 at the Mooring on Friday night, your anniversary. Each detail landed like a physical blow, but I kept my expression neutral. Financial connections? That's where it gets interesting. Vanessa pulled out another document. He's been making regular transfers to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. Started about 6 months ago, shortly after the affair began. Approximately $25,000 per month, totaling around $150,000 so far. Source of the transfers? I asked, professional instincts taking over. Your joint investment account at First Boston Capital. He's been liquidating positions gradually. Not enough to trigger immediate concern, but substantial over time. This was significant. Not just the affair, but financial concealment. Potentially fraud if he was using joint assets without my knowledge or consent. I took photos of all the documents with my phone, then passed Vanessa an envelope with additional cash. Keep following both of them. I need everything. Conversations if possible, additional meeting locations, and especially any financial transactions. I'm particularly interested in what happens tomorrow when they leave for Newport. Vanessa nodded. I'll have a team in place. You'll get updates in real time. Back at home, I forwarded everything to Larry, then called Emma. It's been going on for 7 months, I told her, and he's been moving money offshore. That bastard, she hissed. What's your next move? Meeting with Larry tomorrow morning to finalize the strategic approach. Then, I hesitated. Then I wait. Wait? Emma sounded incredulous. For what? For Drew to leave for Newport with his mistress on our anniversary. For the final pieces of evidence to fall into place. For the perfect moment to strike. The remainder of Thursday passed in a fog of pretense. I attended client meetings, reviewed investment portfolios, and provided recommendations as if my personal life wasn't imploding. My assistant noticed my distraction but attributed it to the upcoming anniversary. Big plans this weekend? She asked innocently. Life-changing ones, I replied with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. Drew texted at 7 p.m., meeting running late, don't wait up. I responded with a simple, okay, and spent the evening methodically documenting our financial holdings, creating a comprehensive spreadsheet of assets, account numbers, and recent transactions. The financial manager in me took comfort in the orderliness of numbers, the clarity of spreadsheets, while the wife in me mourned what those numbers represented, the quantifiable value of a decade spent building a life that was now disintegrating. At 11:30 p.m., my phone buzzed with an update from Vanessa. Subject currently at Weston with OP, likely staying overnight. Attached was a photo of Drew and Olivia entering the hotel, his arm around her waist, her head tilted toward his shoulder. In a gesture of comfortable intimacy, I saved the photo, set my phone aside, and continued working on my comprehensive financial document. Our anniversary was now less than 24 hours away. Drew would come home tomorrow morning, pretend to work a partial day, then leave for Newport. with Olivia, all while I waited expectantly for a surprise that was never meant for me. The betrayal had crystallized from shocking discovery into something harder, colder, more defined, a clear problem requiring a precise solution. And I was very, very good at finding solutions. When Drew arrived home at 7 a.m. on Friday, I was already in the kitchen, dressed for work, preparing coffee. He looked momentarily surprised to find me there, but quickly recovered. "Early client meeting?" he asked, accepting the mug I handed him. "Portfolio review for the Hansons," I replied. "They're flying to London this afternoon, so we had to meet first thing." He nodded, seemingly relieved at my explanation for being up and ready before his return. "I crashed at Jason's after the meeting ran late," he offered without being asked. "We ended up working until 2 a.m., and his place was closer than coming, all the way back to Beacon Hill." I noted the unnecessary elaboration, the defensive quality in his voice. "Must be an important acquisition," I remarked mildly. "Game-changing," he agreed, relaxing at my apparent acceptance. "Listen, about this weekend." Here it was, the setup for his anniversary deception. "I may need to slip away for a few hours tomorrow for one final meeting with the softcore team," he continued, not quite meeting my eyes. "Their CEO is only in town briefly, and this could make or break the deal. I promise I'll make it up to you." "On our anniversary?" I kept my tone light, curious rather than accusatory. "I know. Terrible timing." He reached for my hand across the kitchen island. "But the surprise I've planned will more than make up for it. Trust me?" I looked into the blue eyes I'd trusted for 10 years and smiled. "Of course. Your career is important too." Relief washed across his features. "You're amazing, Becca. The most understanding wife in the world." "I try," I said, squeezing his hand before pulling away. "I need to head out for that meeting." "Will you be home when I get back?" "Actually, I need to go into the office for a few hours this morning. Final preparations for the softcore meeting." "Final preparations for Newport," I translated silently. "I'll see you this evening then," I said, gathering my portfolio and car keys. Drew kissed me goodbye, his lips brushing mine briefly. "Looking forward to our anniversary tomorrow," he said. 10 years deserves something special." "Yes," I agreed, meeting his gaze steadily. "It certainly does." As I drove to my 9 a.m. meeting with Larry Cohen, my phone buzzed with another update from Vanessa. Subject shopping at Tiffany's on Newberry Street. Purchasing diamond earrings, $6,200 on joint Amex. Anniversary gift for Olivia Parker, purchased with our money. The final insult in a cascade of betrayals. I forwarded the message to Larry with a single question. "Enough evidence?" His response came quickly. "More than enough. See you at 9. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you're enjoying this journey so far. In our next video, you'll see exactly how I turned the tables on Drew's carefully planned deception, and how those diamond earrings ultimately cost him millions. Sometimes the most powerful response isn't the loudest, it's the most strategic. That first day passed in a surreal haze of practical actions and emotional containment. I moved through our home with new awareness, seeing it not just as the space we'd shared, but as an asset with a specific value. $2. $2 million according to the most recent appraisal. The lake house in New Hampshire, $850,000. Our joint investment accounts, approximately $7 million. Retirement funds, insurance policies, stock options from Drew's position at Next Gen Technologies, all of it suddenly transformed from the foundation of our shared future to contested terrain in an impending battle. Larry Cohen's office offered a panoramic view of Boston Harbor, the October sun dancing on the water as sailboats cut white paths across the blue surface. The attorney himself was nothing like I expected. Not the aggressive shark I'd imagined, but a thoughtful, soft-spoken man with intelligent eyes and a deliberate manner. Tell me everything, he said after the preliminaries, starting with what you want out of this situation. I considered his question carefully. What did I want? Revenge? Justice? Financial security? I want what's fair, I said finally. We built our life together. I've contributed equally, sometimes more when his company was struggling. I want recognition of that contribution, and I want protection from whatever he might try when he realizes I know. Larry nodded, making notes. Massachusetts is an equitable distribution state, which generally works in your favor. The fact that you're a financial professional also helps. Judges appreciate parties who understand the nuances of complex assets. He looked up. But first, we need to establish the full picture. What evidence do you have of the affair so far? I showed him the photos I'd taken of Drew's Apple Watch notification. Not much yet, I admitted. But I've hired a PI, and I expect more concrete proof within days. Good, Larry said. Documentation is critical. In the meantime, we should discuss the prenuptial agreement, if there is one. There is, I confirmed, pulling the document from my portfolio. We signed it just before the wedding. Drew's parents insisted, as his family had some generational wealth they wanted to protect. Larry reviewed the document, his expression unchanging except for a slight raised eyebrow. This is interesting, he said after a few minutes. Section 4. 3 specifies that in case of infidelity by either party, the injured spouse is entitled to 60% of all marital assets, plus continued ownership of the primary residence. He looked up at me. Did you read this clause before signing? Of course, I replied. I insisted on it. Drew's father had a history of affairs, and I wanted protection. Drew agreed immediately. He said he'd never be unfaithful, so the clause was irrelevant. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. This changes our approach, Larry said, tapping the document thoughtfully. If we can conclusively prove the affair, your position is significantly stronger. He hesitated. However, I should warn you that men in your husband's position often don't respond well when cornered. We should prepare for aggressive tactics. I thought of Drew's ambition, his competitive nature, the way he approached business deals like battles to be won at any cost. I'm counting on it, I said, which is why we need to be 3 steps ahead. Larry studied me for a moment, then smiled slightly. Most clients come in emotional, unfocused. You're different. I manage risk for a living, I told him. This is just another type of risk management. After leaving Larry's office, I met briefly with my financial advisor, instructing her to prepare a complete analysis of our joint assets and to flag any unusual transactions in the past year. Then I drove home, arriving just before Drew would typically return from work. I prepared dinner as I would on any normal Wednesday: roasted salmon, asparagus, a bottle of the Sancerre he favored. I applied makeup to cover the dark circles under my eyes, changed into the casual elegance of jeans and a cashmere sweater that Drew once said brought out the green in my eyes. The perfect picture of a wife unaware that her marriage was built on quicksand. When Drew arrived home at 7:30, I greeted him with a kiss and asked about his day. He launched into a detailed account of the softcore acquisition challenges, his enthusiasm seeming genuine until his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, frowned slightly, and excused himself to handle one quick email. I wondered if it was her, if O was messaging to finalize their anniversary weekend plans. The thought should have wounded me, but instead it strengthened my resolve. While Drew was distracted in his home office, I slipped into the master bedroom and placed a small device beneath his nightstand, a tracker Vanessa had provided that would allow us to monitor his movements more effectively than cell phone location. Data alone. Over dinner, Drew was attentive, even affectionate, complimenting the meal and asking about my day. I provided the edited version, client meetings, portfolio reviews, nothing unusual. He mentioned the upcoming anniversary, his eyes bright with what appeared to be genuine excitement. "I can't wait for you to see what I've planned," he said, reaching across the table to take my hand. 10 years deserves something truly special. I smiled and squeezed his hand. "I'm looking forward to it," I replied, the words tasting bitter despite the sweet wine. 10 years is a significant milestone. After dinner, as we cleaned up together and practiced domestic harmony, Drew's phone buzzed again. This time, he didn't even excuse himself, just glanced at it and typed a quick response. "Martin needs clarification on the term sheet," he explained, naming his colleague at NextGen. I nodded, saying nothing. Later, as Drew showered before bed, I checked our joint credit card statement online. There it was, a charge from 2 weeks ago to Newport Bay Inn & Spa. Next to it, a charge for an expensive restaurant I didn't recognize, and another for a jewelry store in Providence. The anniversary. Surprise was taking shape in transaction records, each one a specific betrayal. I saved screenshots of each charge, emailed them to Larry and Vanessa, then cleared my browsing history and closed the laptop. When Drew emerged from the bathroom, I was already in bed, pretending to read. "Everything okay?" he asked, noticing my unusual quietness. "Just tired," I replied. "Big client presentation tomorrow." He nodded, seeming relieved at my simple explanation, and slid into bed beside me. As his breathing slowed into sleep, I lay awake, acutely aware of the stranger sharing my bed. This man I'd loved for a decade who had somehow become a carefully constructed facade rather than a partner. Tomorrow would bring more information, more evidence, more strategic positioning. For tonight, I needed rest and clarity. The anniversary countdown continued, 36 hours until Drew planned to leave for Newport with O. The clock was ticking on both his betrayal and my response. Thursday morning arrived with a text from Vanessa. "Preliminary findings ready. Can meet at 11 a.m. Coffee shop on Newberry?" I confirmed while Drew was in the shower, then prepared to maintain the increasingly difficult charade of normalcy. Over. Breakfast. Drew mentioned a late meeting that evening. "The softcore team wants to review the final acquisition terms. Might go until 9 or 10. Don't forget we have the Prestons tonight," I said, repeating yesterday's fabrication to test his reaction. Drew paused, coffee cup halfway to his lips. "The Prestons? I thought that was next week." "No, it's tonight," I insisted, watching him carefully. "I confirmed with Diane yesterday." His brow furrowed in what appeared to be genuine confusion, then cleared. "You're right, I must have mixed up the dates. But I can't reschedule this meeting. It's crucial for the deal." "I understand," I said, hiding my satisfaction at catching him in the lie. "I'll make your excuses to them." "Thanks, Becca. You're the best." He kissed my cheek, grabbed his briefcase, and headed for the door. "I'll text when I'm wrapping up." After he left, I changed into a casual outfit that wouldn't attract attention and headed to my meeting with Vanessa. The coffee shop on Newberry Street was busy enough to provide anonymity, but quiet enough for conversation in a corner booth. Vanessa slid a manila folder across the table. Her name is Olivia Parker, 31, marketing director at Visual Path Media, which has been working with NextGen Technologies on their rebranding for the past year. They met at a corporate retreat in March. I opened the folder to find photographs of a slender woman with auburn hair, elegant and professional in appearance. In one photo, she was entering the Weston Copley place with Drew, his hand resting possessively on the small of her back. In another, they were dining at an upscale restaurant, leaning toward each other in intimate conversation. The timestamps showed these were taken within the past week. 7 months, I murmured, calculating the timeline of their relationship. "How often?" "Twice weekly, generally. Sometimes more. Always the same pattern. Late work meetings as the excuse. Hotel. Rendezvous or dinners in discreet locations. They're not particularly careful, which suggests either confidence or carelessness. The Newport trip? Vanessa nodded. Confirmed. Reservation at the Newport Bay Inn and Spa, Harborview Suite, Friday through Sunday. Dinner reservations for 2 at the Mooring on Friday night, your anniversary. Each detail landed like a physical blow, but I kept my expression neutral. Financial connections? That's where it gets interesting. Vanessa pulled out another document. He's been making regular transfers to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. Started about 6 months ago, shortly after the affair began. Approximately $25,000 per month, totaling around $150,000 so far. Source of the transfers? I asked, professional instincts taking over. Your joint investment account at First Boston Capital. He's been liquidating positions gradually, not enough to trigger immediate concern, but substantial over time. This was significant. Not just the affair, but financial concealment, potentially fraud if he was using joint assets without my knowledge or consent. I took photos of all the documents with my phone, then passed Vanessa an envelope with additional cash. Keep following both of them. I need everything. Conversations if possible, additional meeting locations, and especially any financial transactions. I'm particularly interested in what happens tomorrow when they leave for Newport. Vanessa nodded. I'll have a team in place. You'll get updates in real time. Back at home, I forwarded everything to Larry, then called Emma. It's been going on for 7 months, I told her, and he's been moving money offshore. That bastard, she hissed. What's your next move? Meeting with Larry tomorrow morning to finalize the strategic approach. Then I hesitated. Then I wait. Wait? Emma sounded incredulous. For what? For Drew to leave for Newport with his mistress on our anniversary. For the final pieces of evidence to fall into place. For the perfect moment to strike. The remainder of Thursday passed in a fog of pretense. I attended client meetings, reviewed investment portfolios, and provided recommendations as if my personal life wasn't imploding. My assistant noticed my distraction, but attributed it to the upcoming anniversary. Big plans this weekend? She asked innocently. Life-changing ones, I replied with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. Drew texted at 7 p.m. Meeting running late, don't wait up. I responded with a simple, okay, and spent the evening methodically, documenting our financial holdings, creating a comprehensive spreadsheet of assets, account numbers, and recent transactions. The financial manager in me took comfort in the orderliness of numbers, the clarity of spreadsheets, while the wife in me mourned what those numbers represented, the quantifiable value of a decade spent building a life that was now disintegrating. At 11:30 p.m., my phone buzzed with an update from Vanessa. Subject currently at Weston with OP, likely staying overnight. Attached was a photo of Drew and Olivia entering the hotel, his arm around her waist, her head tilted toward his shoulder. In a gesture of comfortable intimacy, I saved the photo, set my phone aside, and continued working on my comprehensive financial document. Our anniversary was now less than 24 hours away. Drew would come home tomorrow morning, pretend to work a partial day, then leave for Newport. With Olivia, all while I waited expectantly for a surprise that was never meant for me. The betrayal had crystallized from shocking discovery into something harder, colder, more defined. A clear problem requiring a precise solution. And I was very, very good at finding solutions. When Drew arrived home at 7 a.m. on Friday, I was already in the kitchen, dressed for work, preparing coffee. He looked momentarily surprised to find me there, but quickly recovered. Early client meeting? He asked, accepting the mug I handed him. Portfolio review for the Hansons, I replied. They're flying to London this afternoon, so we had to meet first thing. He nodded, seemingly relieved at my explanation for being up and ready before his return. I crashed at Jason's after the meeting ran late, he offered without being asked. We ended up working until 2 a.m. and his place was closer than coming, all the way back to Beacon Hill. I noted the unnecessary elaboration, the defensive quality in his voice. Must be an important acquisition, I remarked mildly. Game-changing, he agreed, relaxing at my apparent acceptance. Listen, about this weekend. Here it was, the setup for his anniversary deception. I may need to slip away for a few hours tomorrow for one final meeting with the softcore team, he continued, not quite meeting my eyes. Their CEO is only in town briefly, and this could make or break the deal. I promise I'll make it up to you. On our anniversary? I kept my tone light, curious rather than accusatory. I know, terrible timing. He reached for my hand across the kitchen island. But the surprise I've planned will more than make up for it. Trust me? I looked into the blue eyes I'd trusted for 10 years and smiled. Of course. Your career is important too. Relief washed across his features. You're amazing, Becca. The most understanding wife in the world. I try, I said, squeezing his hand before pulling away. I need to head out for that meeting. Will you be home when I get back? Actually, I need to go into the office for a few hours this morning. Final preparations for the softcore meeting. Final preparations for Newport, I translated silently. I'll see you this evening then, I said, gathering my portfolio and car keys. Drew kissed me goodbye, his lips brushing mine briefly. Looking forward to our anniversary tomorrow, he said. 10 years deserves something special. Yes, I agreed, meeting his gaze steadily. It certainly does. As I drove to my 9 a.m. meeting with Larry Cohen, my phone buzzed with another update from Vanessa. Subject shopping at Tiffany's on Newberry Street. Purchasing diamond earrings, $6,200 on joint Amex. Anniversary gift for Olivia Parker, purchased with our money. The final insult in a cascade of betrayals. I forwarded the message to Larry with a single question. Enough evidence? His response came quickly. More than enough. See you at 9. Larry's office felt different this morning, less like a sanctuary of legal strategy and more like a war room. He had assembled a small team. Himself, a financial forensics specialist named Marcus, and a paralegal who took notes with quiet efficiency. We're ready to proceed whenever you give the word, Larry began, spreading out the documents I'd provided. The evidence is compelling. The hotel reservations, the photographs, the offshore transfers. Combined with the infidelity clause in your prenup, your position is exceptionally strong. I nodded, processing this confirmation of what I already suspected. What's our first move? Freezing assets, Marcus interjected. Based on the pattern of transfers to the Cayman account, we should act immediately to prevent further diversion of funds. Agreed, Larry said. We've prepared emergency motions to freeze all joint accounts pending divorce proceedings. Given the evidence of financial impropriety, we have solid grounds for this unusual step. And the timing? I asked. That's your call, Larry replied. We can file today, which would immediately restrict his access to joint funds, possibly before he leaves for Newport. Or we can wait until Monday, after your anniversary weekend, which might provide additional evidence but risks further asset diversion. I considered the options carefully. Filing today would tip my hand early. Drew would know something was wrong the moment his cards were declined or his transfers blocked. Filing Monday would allow him to complete his anniversary charade with Olivia, potentially spending even more of our money on her, but would preserve the element of surprise for my ultimate response. Monday, I decided finally. I want complete documentation of this weekend. Every expense, every moment they spend together on our anniversary. But I need protection from major asset movements in the meantime. Marcus nodded. We can implement a monitoring system that alerts us to any unusual transactions above a certain threshold, say $10,000, without actually freezing the accounts. That way, you'll know immediately if he attempts any significant transfers, and we can intervene, on an emergency basis if necessary. Perfect, I agreed. Set it up. Larry cleared his throat. There's one more consideration. Your continued presence in the marital home. Massachusetts law is complex regarding abandonment claims. If you leave now, before filing, it could potentially complicate property division later. I hadn't considered this angle. Part of me wanted to be gone when Drew returned from Newport on Sunday, to disappear from his life as completely as he had emotionally disappeared from mine. But Larry's warning made sense. How long do I need to stay? I asked. Ideally, until after the initial filing on Monday. Once temporary orders are in place regarding the marital residence, you can relocate without legal complications. 3. More days in our home. 3 more days of pretending. I could manage that. What about the Cayman account? I asked, turning to Marcus. Can we trace it? Freeze it? International accounts are tricky, he admitted. We'll need court orders with international enforcement, which takes time. Our initial filing will include requests for comprehensive financial disclosure, which will legally obligate him to reveal all accounts. Concealment at that point would constitute fraud upon the court. Which he'll likely attempt anyway, I noted dryly. Marcus smiled thinly. They usually do, but I'm very good at finding hidden money, Mrs. Wilson. It's what I do. We spent the next 2 hours finalizing our approach, detailed documentation of all assets, preparation of filing papers for Monday morning, establishment of the transaction monitoring system, and a comprehensive plan for my financial protection post-filing. By the time we finished, it was nearly noon. What will you do this weekend? Larry asked as I gathered my things to leave. While he's in Newport? Prepare, I replied simply, and document everything. As I walked to my car, my phone buzzed with a text from Drew. Soft core meeting scheduled for 2 p.m. tomorrow. Should only take a few hours, then the rest of the weekend is all ours. Love you. I stared at the message, marveling at his ability to lie so effortlessly, so thoroughly. Had our entire relationship been this way? Had I been blind, or had he simply become more skilled at deception over time? I composed a response designed to maintain my cover of ignorance. Looking forward to it, don't work too hard, followed by a heart emoji that felt like a betrayal of myself. My next stop was Hamilton Investment Partners, where I had an unexpected meeting with Jonathan Pierce, the firm's managing director and my direct supervisor. Rebecca, he greeted me warmly as I entered his corner office. Thanks for coming in. I wanted to discuss something that couldn't wait until next week. My stomach tightened. Had Drew somehow learned of my investigation? Had he contacted Jonathan to undermine me professionally before I could act? Of course, I replied, keeping my voice steady. What's on your mind? Jonathan leaned forward, his expression serious. The Anderson portfolio. They've decided to significantly increase their investment with us, an additional $50 million. They've specifically requested that you handle the expansion. Relief washed through me, followed by professional pride. The Andersons were one of my earliest clients at Hamilton, a wealthy family whose conservative investment philosophy had evolved under my guidance to include more diverse, higher-yield strategies. Their increased investment was a vote of confidence in my abilities. I'm honored, I said, genuinely pleased despite everything else happening in my life. When would they like to begin? That's the thing, Jonathan replied. They want to move quickly. Initial transfer next week, with strategic implementation over the following month. He hesitated. I know this timing isn't ideal with your anniversary weekend, but I wanted to give you first right of refusal. If it's too much right now, we can assign co-managers. The irony was almost amusing. My anniversary weekend, the one Drew was spending with his mistress in Newport, was now being presented as a potential conflict with a major professional opportunity. It's not a problem, I assured Jonathan. In fact, I'll have time this weekend to begin preliminary strategy development. The Andersons' current portfolio structures would benefit from a similar approach with the new funds, just scaled appropriately. Jonathan appeared both relieved and impressed. Excellent. I'll let them know you're taking the lead. He paused. And Rebecca? This kind of client loyalty is why you're on track for partnership consideration next quarter. Keep it up. Partnership. At Hamilton had been my professional goal since joining the firm 6 years ago. The timing was extraordinary. My marriage imploding just as my career was poised for its next significant advancement. The contrast wasn't lost on me. Thank you, Jonathan. I won't let you down. As I left his office, I felt a strange sense of calm. Whatever happened with Drew in our divorce, my professional future was secure, perhaps even brighter than before. There was something powerfully reassuring about that knowledge. I spent the remainder of the afternoon in my office, dividing my attention between preliminary work on the Anderson expansion and periodic checks of the monitoring system Marcus had established for our joint accounts. By 4 p.m., 3 alerts had come through, all for standard amounts Drew frequently transferred between accounts. Nothing suspicious yet. At 5:30, I received another text from Drew. Heading home, dinner out tonight? Celebrate the start of our anniversary weekend? I nearly declined. The thought of sitting across from him for hours, maintaining my facade of ignorance while he prepared for tomorrow's betrayal, was almost unbearable. But strategic thinking prevailed. One more dinner, one more night of pretense would solidify his confidence that I suspected nothing. Sounds lovely, I responded. Where should we meet? Sorellina at 7:30? I made reservations. Sorellina was one of Boston's finest Italian restaurants, a place we reserved for special occasions. The gesture might have seemed thoughtful if I didn't know the truth, that this was likely Drew's attempt to assuage his guilt before abandoning me on our actual anniversary tomorrow. Perfect. See you there. I used the extra time to meet briefly with Emma at her apartment, bringing her up to date on the legal strategy and dropping off a small suitcase of essentials I would need after Monday's filing. I still can't believe you're going to dinner with him, she said, her expression incredulous. I couldn't do it, Becca. I'd throw a glass of wine in his face the moment he mentioned your anniversary. That would be satisfying, I admitted, but strategically unsound. Right now, Drew believes he's in control, that his deception is working perfectly. That overconfidence is my advantage. Emma studied me with a mixture of admiration and concern. You're handling this with incredible composure. Too much, maybe. Are you actually processing what's happening or just compartmentalizing? It was a fair question. Since discovering Drew's betrayal 2 days ago, I'd functioned almost entirely in strategic mode, gathering information, consulting experts, developing plans. The emotional reckoning had been deferred, set aside in favor of practical action. I'll process it, I promised her. After Monday. Right now, I need clarity more than catharsis. She nodded, understanding but not entirely convinced. Just don't forget to feel it eventually. Otherwise, it stays with you, goes underground, emerges in unexpected ways. When did you become so psychologically insightful? I teased, deflecting. Her concern. 3 years of therapy after my divorce from Alan, she replied dryly. Speaking of which, she disappeared into her bedroom, returning with a small box. I want you to have this for tonight. Inside was a delicate gold necklace with a small phoenix pendant, wings outstretched in flight. I bought this for myself when my divorce was finalized, Emma explained. A reminder that endings can also be beginnings. Wear it tonight. Let it be your secret strength. Touched, I fastened the necklace around my throat. The pendant rested just below my collarbone, its weight subtle but present, a tangible reminder of what awaited on the other side of this ordeal. Thank you, I said, hugging her tightly. For everything. That's what sisters are for, she replied. Now go have dinner with your soon-to-be ex-husband and remember what I told you. Feel it eventually, I recited. No, she corrected with a small smile. The other thing I always tell you, men are temporary, but a good investment strategy is forever. I laughed despite myself, grateful for the moment of levity in this otherwise sobering day. I'll remember. Sorrelina was elegant as always, its warm lighting and sophisticated atmosphere a reminder of happier times when Drew and I had celebrated genuine milestones here, promotions, anniversaries, personal achievements. Now, it felt like the elaborate set of a play where both actors knew their lines, but only one understood the true plot. Drew was already seated when I arrived, looking handsome in a charcoal suit I'd helped him select last Christmas. He stood as I approached, his expression appreciative as he took in my appearance. The forest green dress that complemented my eyes, the subtle makeup, and Emma's phoenix necklace. You look stunning, he said, kissing my cheek before holding my chair. That necklace is new, isn't it? A gift from Emma, I replied truthfully. She thought it suited me. She was right. He smiled, seemingly genuine, which only deepened the surreal quality of the moment. How could he sit across from me, complimenting my appearance, planning our supposed anniversary celebration, while simultaneously preparing to spend that very anniversary with another woman? We ordered drinks, a Barolo for him, a gin martini for me, and studied the menus in companionable silence. This, too, was part of our long-established ritual. Drinks first, conversation about our days, then food, discussion and ordering, the comfortable patterns of a decade together. How was your day? He asked, following the script perfectly. Any progress on the Hansen portfolio? Actually, something bigger came up, I replied, allowing myself this small piece of truth. The Andersons are increasing their investment by $50 million. Jonathan asked me to handle it personally. Drew's eyebrows raised, his surprise and pride appearing authentic. Becca, that's fantastic. The Andersons are notoriously conservative with their money. This is a major vote of confidence. It is, I agreed, and potentially a step toward partnership. We should be celebrating that, not just our anniversary, he said, raising his wine glass. To my brilliant wife, soon-to-be partner at Hamilton Investment. I clinked my martini against his glass, wondering if he heard the irony in his words. Soon-to-be indeed, just not in the way he meant. Thank you. It's been a long-term goal. I've always admired that about you, Drew said, his expression softening. The way you set goals and methodically achieve them. No drama, no shortcuts, just consistent, intelligent work. The compliment stung with its accuracy. Yes, I had always approached life methodically, setting goals and working systematically toward them. Our marriage had been one such goal, a partnership I'd believed in and invested in daily. And tomorrow, Drew would mock that investment by spending our anniversary with his mistress. What about you? I asked, deflecting. How's the softcore acquisition progressing? Drew launched into a detailed explanation of the deal's complexity, the competing interests involved, the strategic importance to Next Gen. I listened with practiced attention, asking appropriate questions, noting the places where his narrative contained subtle inconsistencies that might indicate fabrication. Was any of this real? Or was the entire acquisition story a construct to explain his absences? As our entrees arrived, osso buco for him, scallops for me, Drew transitioned smoothly to our anniversary plans. About tomorrow, he began, his expression apologetic. The meeting I mentioned shouldn't take more than a few hours in the afternoon. I was thinking we could have a late lunch before I go, and then I'll meet you back at home for the evening surprise. The evening surprise that would never materialize. because he'd be in Newport with Olivia. I nodded, playing along. That sounds nice. What time is your meeting? 2:00, he replied promptly. Should be done by 5 at the latest. At the office? I asked innocently. A flicker of hesitation crossed his face. Actually, at the Meridian Hotel. Softcore's CEO prefers neutral territory for final negotiations. Another lie, seamlessly delivered. The casual ease with which he invented details was chilling. How many other times had I accepted similar fabrications without question? Well, don't rush on my account, I said, offering him more rope. These deals are crucial for your career. I wouldn't want tomorrow's celebration to compromise that. Relief softened his features. You're the best, Becca. So understanding. He reached across the table to take my hand. That's one of the reasons these 10 years have been so amazing. We've always supported each other's ambitions. I forced a smile, ignoring the bitter taste of his hypocrisy. Partners in all things. Always, he agreed, squeezing my hand before returning to his meal. The remainder of dinner passed in similar fashion. Pleasant conversation interspersed with moments of startling intimacy that felt increasingly like performances on Drew's part. He reminisced about our early days together, shared his excitement about the future, even mentioned the possibility of finally starting the family we'd postponed for career advancement. Each word was a fresh betrayal, each sentiment a lie layered upon lies. By the time we finished our shared tiramisu, I was emotionally exhausted from maintaining my composure. The phoenix pendant felt heavy against my skin, a reminder of what awaited me on the other side of this charade. Drew insisted on paying despite our long-standing habit of alternating, another gesture that might have seemed thoughtful if I didn't know he was assuaging his guilt with our joint funds. As we waited for the valet to bring our respective cars, he pulled me close in the cool October evening, his cologne familiar and suddenly cloying. I love you, Becca, he murmured against my hair. These 10 years have been the best of my life. I allowed myself to lean into him one last time, memorizing the feeling of what I had believed was true partnership, genuine love. It has been quite a decade, I replied, careful to neither confirm nor deny reciprocal feelings I no longer possessed. His car arrived first, a sleek BMW he'd purchased last year when NextGen secured its first major funding round. See you at home? He asked, kissing me briefly. I'll be there soon, I promised. Just going to stop by the office to pick up some materials for the Anderson project. Another convenient truth, I did need to collect documents, but more importantly, I needed time alone to prepare for one final night under the same roof as the man who had so thoroughly betrayed me. Drew drove away with a wave, likely relieved, to have completed this obligatory pre-anniversary dinner, freeing him to focus on tomorrow's true plans with Olivia. As my own car arrived, my phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa. Subject heading to Weston. OP already checked in. So he wasn't even coming home tonight. Another deception in an evening full of them. He would spend the night before our anniversary with his mistress, then return home tomorrow to maintain his elaborate fiction before leaving for Newport. I texted back a single word. Understood. The night air suddenly felt cleaner, easier to breathe. Tomorrow would bring the final act of Drew's deception and the beginning of my response. The pieces were arranged, the strategy set. All that remained was execution. As I drove toward Hamilton Investment Partners to collect the Anderson files, Emma's phoenix pendant caught the streetlights, glinting with quiet promise. Endings, beginnings, and the transformative fire in between. I was ready for all of it. I arrived at my office just after 9 on Friday morning, the day before our anniversary. The Hamilton Investment Partners building stood tall among Boston's financial district skyscrapers, its glass exterior reflecting the clear autumn sky. This place had always represented certainty to me. Rational decisions, calculated risks, measurable outcomes. Now I clung to that familiarity as my personal life unraveled. My assistant Claire looked up from her desk as I approached. "Morning, Rebecca. I moved your 10 o'clock with the Sandersons to next Wednesday as requested, and Jonathan asked if you could stop by his office when you get a moment." "Thanks, Claire. I'll see him now." I found Jonathan reviewing quarterly reports, his reading. Glasses perched on the end of his nose. At 62, with silver hair and the weathered face of someone who'd navigated multiple financial crises, he embodied the steady guidance that had drawn me to Hamilton in the first place. "Rebecca," he smiled, gesturing to the chair across from him. "How's the Anderson expansion coming along?" "I've drafted the preliminary strategy, planning to refine it this weekend and have it ready for your review Monday morning." "Excellent." He studied me for a moment. "You seem preoccupied. Everything all right?" I hesitated. Jonathan wasn't just my boss. He'd been a mentor since I joined the firm. Still, I'd always maintained a strict separation between my professional and personal lives. "Actually, I could use some advice," I said finally. "Not about the Andersons." He removed his glasses, giving me his full attention. "Of course. If you discovered someone had been systematically diverting funds from a joint account without your knowledge or consent, what would be your first move?" His eyebrows rose slightly. "Professionally speaking, freeze the accounts, document the diversions, and initiate recovery proceedings." "And if freezing the accounts might alert them before you fully assess the damage?" Jonathan leaned back, his expression sharpening with understanding. "This isn't a client issue, is it?" I met his gaze steadily. "No." He nodded, processing. "This." Then I'd implement monitoring protocols first, track every movement while gathering evidence. Once the documentation was complete, I'd secure the remaining assets before confronting the responsible party. He paused. "Rebecca, if you need time off—" "I don't," I interrupted, perhaps too quickly. "Work is stabilizing right now. The one thing that still makes complete sense." "I understand that instinct," he said quietly. "When my first wife left, I practically lived in this office. But eventually, this is different," I said, then softened my tone. "But I appreciate the concern." "Well, my door is always open." "And Rebecca?" he added as I stood to leave. "Whatever's happening, remember that you've built something valuable here. Your professional standing is secure, regardless of other circumstances." I nodded, grateful for his implicit support. "Thank you, Jonathan." Back in my office, I closed the door and turned to the Anderson portfolio expansion. Work had always been my refuge, and now more than ever, I needed the ordered logic of investment strategies and market analyses. I lost myself in spreadsheets and projections, emerging only when Claire knocked to remind me about lunch. "I'm expecting an important call," I told her. "Could you have something brought up?" "Of course. The usual salad?" "Perfect." After she left, I checked my phone. No updates from Vanessa yet. I wondered where Drew was now, what elaborate preparations he was making for his weekend with Olivia, while simultaneously maintaining the fiction of our anniversary celebration. Right on cue, my phone buzzed with a text from him. "Thinking of you. Can't wait for tomorrow. Love you." The casual cruelty of those words made my stomach tighten. I typed back a deliberately ambiguous response. Tomorrow will certainly be memorable. At 1 o'clock, I received the call I'd been waiting for, not from Vanessa, but from Patricia Wilson, Drew's mother. "Rebecca, dear, how are you?" Her voice carried its usual warmth tinged with Boston Brahmin restraint. At 68, Patricia maintained the gracious formality of her generation while harboring a surprising streak of independent thinking that had always made me respect her. "I'm well, Patricia. This is unexpected." I hope I'm not interrupting your workday. I wanted to wish you happy anniversary a bit early, as I'll be at the Cape this weekend. A lump formed in my throat. In all the chaos of discovery and planning, I hadn't considered Drew's family, the relationships that would be collateral damage in the impending divorce. That's very thoughtful. Thank you. Has Andrew told you about the gift yet? He was so excited when he showed it to me. I froze. What gift? Oh, Patricia sounded flustered. I shouldn't have mentioned it. Pretend I didn't say anything. My mind raced. Had Drew actually prepared some anniversary gesture for me, alongside his plans with Olivia? Or had he lied to his mother too? It's all right, I assured her. I like surprises. Well, all I'll say is he put a great deal of thought into it. 10 years is significant. She paused. You've been good for him, Rebecca. Before you, I worried he might follow his father's pattern. The irony was so acute I nearly laughed aloud. Instead, I asked, what pattern was that? A heavy silence. I shouldn't speak ill of the dead, but Charles was never satisfied with what he had, always looking elsewhere, convinced something better waited just around the corner. Her voice lowered. It was a relief when Andrew found someone as grounded as you. Another piece clicked into place. Drew's father had been unfaithful, perhaps, serially. The very behavior Drew had claimed to despise was now his own. And Patricia, who had lived through her husband's betrayals, was congratulating me on supposedly breaking that cycle. Patricia, I said carefully, may I ask you something? Rather personal? Of course, dear. If you had known earlier about Charles's pattern, would you have done anything differently? The question hung between us, loaded with implications neither of us acknowledged directly. Ah, she said finally. What? An interesting question on the eve of your anniversary. Another pause. Yes, I would have protected myself sooner. Financially, emotionally, practically. Dignity costs far too much when purchased retroactively. My respect for her deepened immeasurably in that moment. She knew exactly what I was really asking. Thank you, Patricia. That's clarifying. Rebecca, she said, her tone gentle but direct. Whatever decisions you're facing, remember that you've always impressed me with your clarity of thought. Trust that quality in yourself. After we disconnected, I sat motionless, absorbing the layers of our conversation. Patricia had effectively confirmed what I'd already sensed, that she suspected or perhaps even knew about Drew's infidelity, and that she was, in her restrained way, encouraging me to protect myself. My phone buzzed again with an update from Vanessa. Subject purchased champagne and roses. Now en route to Neil's Jewelers on Boylston. More anniversary preparations, but for which woman? I was beginning to understand that Drew had created parallel narratives. One for Olivia, one for me, perhaps even a third version for his mother. Keeping them separated must require constant vigilance, elaborate fabrications, careful staging. It was exhausting just contemplating the mental gymnastics involved. How long had he been living this compartmentalized existence? And how had I missed the signs? At 3 o'clock, I left the office, telling Claire I'd work on the Anderson proposal, from home. Instead, I drove to the small office suite Vanessa used as her operational headquarters, a nondescript building near Government Center that housed various professional services. Vanessa met me in a sparsely furnished conference room, accompanied by a slender man in his 30s, whom she introduced as Keith, her technical specialist. We've been tracking Andrew's movements all day, she began without preamble. He's been busy. Keith opened a laptop and pulled up a series of photographs time-stamped throughout the day. Drew entering Neil's Jewelers. Drew at a florist selecting a lavish arrangement. Drew meeting a man Vanessa identified as a business associate at a restaurant near the financial district. What's most interesting, Vanessa continued, is that he's made duplicate purchases at several locations. She pointed to the screen. 2 jewelry boxes from Neil's charged to different accounts. 2 flower arrangements from Winston Flowers. 1 delivered to the Newport Inn, 1 scheduled for delivery to your home tomorrow morning. He's staging parallel anniversary celebrations, I murmured, the full extent of Drew's deception becoming clearer. 1 for me, 1 for her. Precisely, and he's been careful with the financial trails. The Newport reservations, the gifts for Olivia Parker, those are charged to his personal credit card or paid in cash. The gifts apparently intended for... You come from your joint account. What about the offshore transfers? Keith took over, pulling up a series of financial records. We've identified the Cayman account. It's registered to a shell company called Horizon Ventures LLC. Transfers occur regularly, always just under $10,000 to avoid automatic reporting requirements. The total? Approximately $157,000 over the past 6 months. The pattern suggests he's building a financial cushion separate from your marital assets. I nodded, processing this information. Has he made any transfers today? Not yet, Keith replied. But we've got alerts set up. You'll know immediately if he moves. Any significant amount. What's your assessment of his overall pattern? I asked Vanessa. She considered for a moment. He's methodical, but not particularly sophisticated. The separate credit cards, the careful scheduling to avoid overlaps, the gradual accumulation of a separate financial reserve. These suggest someone who's planned for contingencies but doesn't expect to be caught. Overconfident, I suggested. Exactly. Vanessa nodded. He believes his system is foolproof because it's worked so far. That makes him vulnerable. What's his schedule for tomorrow? Keith consulted another document. Based on reservations and what we've observed, breakfast delivery scheduled to your home at 8 a.m. Meeting with Olivia Parker at the Westin at 11 a.m. Checkout and departure for Newport scheduled for 1 p.m. He told you his fictional meeting is at 2 p.m., so that timing works for his cover story. The classic misdirection, Vanessa added. He'll leave as if going to a business meeting, meet Parker, and they'll drive to Newport together. Meanwhile, you'll receive flowers, probably a gift, and be told to expect his return by evening, which obviously won't happen. I absorbed this detailed choreography of deception, impressed despite myself at the intricacy of Drew's planning. He'd constructed an elaborate facade designed to maintain both relationships simultaneously, neither woman aware of the other. What's your next move? Vanessa asked. I'd been considering this question since meeting with Larry earlier. The legal strategy was clear. Document everything, secure assets, file for divorce with the strongest possible position. But there was also the personal element, the question of how and when to confront Drew directly. I want comprehensive documentation of tomorrow, I decided. Everything from the moment he leaves our house until they reach Newport. I want photographs, timestamps, receipts, evidence that cannot be explained away or minimized. We'll have a full team in position, Vanessa assured me. They won't make a move without our knowledge. And after that? That depends on your ultimate goal. Vanessa's expression was neutral, professional. Are you seeking maximum financial advantage? Public exposure? Private confrontation? The question gave me pause. What did I want from this endgame? The financial protection was essential, of course. I wouldn't allow Drew to divert our joint assets to fund his double life. But beyond that, did I want to humiliate him publicly? Expose Olivia to the reality of her relationship with a married man? Or simply extract myself as cleanly as possible and move forward? I want what's fair, I said finally, echoing my earlier words to Larry. I want recognition of my contribution to our marriage and shared assets. I want protection from further financial exploitation, and... I hesitated, allowing myself to acknowledge the emotion beneath the strategic thinking. I want him to know that he didn't fool me, that in the end, I saw him clearly. Vanessa nodded, understanding. We'll give you everything you need to accomplish those goals. By the time I left Vanessa's office, it was after 5. Drew had texted again. Wrapping up early? Dinner at home tonight? I'll pick up from that Italian place you love. One more evening of pretense. One more night of playing the unsuspecting wife while he finalized his anniversary deception. I could do this, had to do this, to preserve the strategic advantage of surprise. Sounds perfect, I replied. I'll be home by 6:30. I drove home. Through Boston's Friday evening traffic, the familiar landmarks of our life together taking on a surreal quality. The bookstore where we'd spent Sunday mornings browsing. The coffee shop where we'd had our third date. The park where we'd once discussed having children someday when our careers were established. Had any of it been real? Or had Drew always been performing, playing the role of devoted husband while harboring the capacity for such elaborate betrayal? I arrived home to find Drew already there, unpacking containers of pasta and salad in the kitchen. He looked up with a smile that seemed genuinely warm. Hey, there's my brilliant investment manager. How was your day? Productive, I replied, setting down my bag and slipping off my shoes. The Anderson strategy is coming together nicely. That's my Becca, always exceeding expectations. He handed me a glass of Barolo, already poured. I was thinking we could eat in the sunroom. It's such a beautiful evening. I followed him to the glass-enclosed space overlooking our carefully landscaped backyard, another project we'd completed together 2 years ago. The setting sun cast a golden glow over the Japanese maples and ornamental grasses, their autumn, colors vibrant in the warm light. Remember when we installed that stone path? Drew asked, nodding toward the garden. You insisted on moving every stone 3 times until the curve was exactly right. And you complained the entire time, I recalled, the memory sharp despite everything. Until it was finished and you admitted I was right about the proportions. You usually are right, he said, his expression softening. About the important things anyway. We ate our pasta and drank our wine as twilight descended, discussing work, mutual friends, the books we were reading, the comfortable conversation of a long-married couple. If I hadn't seen the evidence with my own eyes, I might have been lulled back into believing this was our reality. I was thinking, Drew said as we finished the meal, after the softcore meeting tomorrow, maybe we could drive up to the lake house for the evening portion of our anniversary. It's been too long since we've been there. Another lie layered upon lies. By tomorrow evening, he'd be dining with Olivia in Newport, not driving to New Hampshire with me. That sounds lovely, I replied, maintaining my role in this final act. I'll pack a bag in the morning. Perfect. He reached across the table for my hand, his thumb tracing circles on my palm. 10 years, Becca. Can you believe it? It's gone by so quickly, I said, which was true. A decade of my life invested in this relationship, this man who had constructed such an elaborate deception. I've been thinking a lot about the future lately, Drew continued, his expression earnest. Maybe it's the anniversary milestone, but I feel like we're entering a new phase. Your career is taking off with the Anderson expansion and potential partnership. NextGen is positioned for significant growth after the softcore acquisition. I waited, wondering where this performance was heading. Maybe it's time to revisit the family discussion, he said, his voice gentle. We've always said we'd wait until the timing was right professionally. That time might be approaching. Children. He was suggesting we start a family, even as he prepared to spend our anniversary with another woman. The calculated cruelty of it stole my breath momentarily. That's something to consider, I managed, withdrawing my hand on the pretense of reaching for my wine. After the Anderson expansion is implemented. Of course, he agreed quickly. No rush, just something I've been thinking about. As we cleared the dishes together, Drew's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his expression flickering briefly before He tucked it back into his pocket. "Everything okay?" I asked innocently. "Just Martin checking on some softcore details," he replied smoothly. "Nothing that can't wait until tomorrow." Martin again, the convenient colleague whose name appeared whenever Drew received messages from Olivia. I wondered if Martin even existed, or if he was entirely fictional. "You should probably respond if it's about tomorrow's meeting," I suggested, giving him permission to continue his deception. "You're right. Give me a minute." He stepped into his home office while I finished loading the dishwasher, conscious of playing my part in this elaborate charade. When he returned, his expression was composed once more. "Sorry about that. Where were we? Oh, right. The lake house tomorrow night. I was thinking we could stop at that vineyard on the way, the one with the amazing Riesling." "Sounds perfect," I agreed, marveling at his ability to seamlessly return to his fabricated anniversary plans. The remainder of the evening passed in similar fashion, moments of genuine-seeming connection interspersed with Drew's careful maintenance of his fiction. We watched a show we'd been following, discussed an upcoming dinner with friends, and maintained the appearance of a happily married couple on the eve of a significant milestone. By 11, we were preparing for bed. The familiar nighttime routine now waited with my awareness of its impending conclusion. As Drew showered, I checked my phone for updates from Vanessa. Nothing new. Drew had maintained his careful separation of activities today, nothing that directly connected him to Olivia except for their scheduled meeting tomorrow. I placed my phone on the charger and slipped into bed, trying to ignore the hollow feeling in my chest. Tomorrow would be our actual anniversary, 10 years since we'd exchanged vows and promises that Drew had systematically violated. 10 years? Since I'd committed to a partnership that had apparently been undermined for most of its existence. Drew emerged from the bathroom, towel wrapped around his waist, hair damp. He smiled at me, that familiar smile that had once made my heart beat faster, and now only highlighted the gulf between appearance and reality. "Almost forgot to mention," he said casually. "I ran into Jason today. He and Megan are planning a dinner party next weekend. I said we'd check our schedules. Jason Murphy, the friend Drew had claimed to stay with last night while actually spending the evening with Olivia at the Westin. I wondered if Jason was complicit in Drew's deception or merely another prop in his elaborate fiction. "Sounds nice," I replied noncommittally. "We can check calendars tomorrow." Drew slipped beneath the covers beside me, his presence both familiar and suddenly alien. How many nights had he lain next to me like this, planning his next rendezvous with Olivia? How many mornings had he kissed me goodbye before meeting her? The intimate proximity felt like another betrayal. "Excited about tomorrow?" he asked, turning toward me in the dimness. "Very," I replied truthfully, though not for the reasons he assumed. "I'm curious to see what you've planned." "You'll have to be patient just a little longer." He leaned over to kiss me softly. "I think you'll be surprised." "I'm sure I will be," I agreed, the irony almost too much to bear. "Good night, Becca," he murmured, settling back onto his pillow. "Love you." "Good night," I replied, deliberately omitting the reciprocal declaration of love. I lay awake long after Drew's breathing had deepened into sleep, contemplating the man beside me and the parallel lives he'd constructed. Tomorrow he would enact the final phase of his anniversary deception, unaware that I had uncovered everything. Tomorrow I would gather the last pieces of evidence needed for the legal strategy Larry had outlined, and Monday, the pretense would end. My phone illuminated briefly with a text from Emma. "Thinking of you. Still need guest room tomorrow?" I responded simply, "Monday. We'll explain tomorrow." Sleep eventually came, bringing with it disjointed dreams of parallel worlds and endless corridors leading to locked doors. I woke shortly after dawn, Drew still sleeping beside me, his face relaxed and untroubled in the early morning light. Our anniversary had arrived. I slipped quietly from bed and made coffee, carrying a mug out to the small balcony off our bedroom. The October morning was crisp but clear, the trees in our neighborhood displaying their full autumn splendor: red, maples, golden oaks, the burnished bronze of Japanese dogwoods. The beauty seemed incongruous with the emotional devastation unfolding behind our home's tasteful facade. At 7:30, the doorbell rang, right on schedule according to Vanessa's intelligence. I gave Drew, who was just stirring, time to register, the sound before going downstairs to answer it. A delivery person stood on our doorstep, holding an elaborate arrangement of roses and lilies. "Delivery for Rebecca Wilson," he announced, handing me the flowers and a small envelope. "Thank you," I said, accepting them with a practiced smile. I carried the arrangement to the kitchen, setting it on the island counter just as Drew appeared, his timing too perfect to be coincidental. He'd been waiting for this moment, the beginning of his carefully choreographed anniversary performance. "Looks like someone's starting the day with a surprise," he commented, smiling as he approached to kiss my cheek. I opened the envelope and read the card aloud. "To my amazing wife on our 10th anniversary. The first of many surprises today. All my love, Drew." "Happy anniversary, Becca," he said, wrapping his arms around me from behind, his chin resting on my shoulder as we both admired the flowers. "They're beautiful," I said, which was true. Red roses and white lilies, my favorites. Drew had always been attentive to such details. I wondered if Olivia's flowers, delivered to Newport, were equally personalized. "Just the beginning," he promised. "But first, breakfast." Right on cue, the doorbell rang again. Drew went to answer, returning with a bag from our favorite bakery, another prearranged delivery. "Almond croissants and that blackberry Danish you love," he announced, unpacking the pastries onto plates. "I figured we could have a lazy breakfast before I have to head to that meeting." "Perfect," I agreed, pouring us both coffee. "What time do you need to leave?" "Around 1, he replied smoothly. "The meeting's at 2, should wrap up by 5 at the latest. Then," he smiled mischievously, "the real celebration begins in Newport with Olivia." The audacity of his deception was breathtaking. We ate breakfast together at the kitchen island, Drew reminiscing about our early days together, our first apartment, the startup weekend where he'd met his next-gen co-founders, my initial interview at Hamilton. His nostalgia seemed genuine, which only deepened the surreal quality of the moment. How could he remember those shared milestones so fondly while systematically betraying our partnership? After breakfast, Drew disappeared upstairs momentarily, returning with a small gift box wrapped in silver paper with a blue ribbon. "I know. The main surprise comes later," he said, presenting it to me. "But I wanted you to have something to open this morning." I accepted the box, feeling its weight. Something substantial. Slowly, I unwrapped it, conscious of Drew watching my reaction carefully. Inside was a velvet jewelry case from Neil's, the jeweler Vanessa had photographed him visiting yesterday. I opened it to reveal a diamond pendant on a delicate platinum chain, elegant, expensive, and precisely my taste. The duplicate of what he'd purchased for Olivia, or a separate selection? Either way, it represented another layer of calculated deception. "Drew, it's beautiful," I said, genuinely impressed despite everything. The pendant featured a round diamond surrounded by a halo of smaller stones, understated yet luxurious. "Let me," he offered, taking the necklace and moving behind me to fasten it around my neck. His fingers brushed my skin as he secured the clasp, the gesture intimate and familiar. "Perfect," he declared, turning me toward the decorative mirror in our entryway. "It suits you." I studied our reflection, the beautiful necklace glittering at my throat, Drew's hands resting on my shoulders. his expression one of apparent devotion. The perfect picture of an anniversary celebration, entirely undermined by what I knew about his true plans for the day. "Thank you," I said, touching the pendant lightly. "I'll treasure it." Another truth, though not for the reasons he assumed. This necklace would become evidence, a tangible reminder of the elaborate performance Drew had constructed for our final anniversary. "I have something for you too," I told him, retrieving a package from my office. I'd purchased the vintage watch months ago, when our anniversary had still represented a genuine milestone rather than the endpoint of our marriage. Drew opened it eagerly, his appreciation seemingly authentic as he examined the 1960s Omega Seamaster. "Becca, this is incredible. How did you find it? I've been looking at these for years." "I have my sources," I replied, watching him fasten it around his wrist, adjusting the band with meticulous attention. Another moment that might have been meaningful if it wasn't shadowed by the knowledge of his imminent departure to meet Olivia. "It's perfect," he declared, kissing me with apparent tenderness. "You know me so well." The irony of his statement hung in the air between us, unacknowledged. I did know him, better than he realized. I knew about the offshore account, the scheduled rendezvous, the parallel anniversary celebrations. I knew the precise timing of his planned betrayal and the elaborate fiction he'd constructed to conceal it. "What should we do with our morning?" Drew asked, his arm around my waist. "We have a few hours before I need to leave for that meeting." "Actually," I said, "I need to finish some work on the Anderson proposal. Their funds transfer next week, and Jonathan's expecting my complete strategy by Monday morning." Drew nodded, a flicker of relief crossing his features so quickly I might have missed it if I hadn't been watching for it. "Of course, that makes sense. I have some emails to catch up on anyway." He was grateful for the excuse, I realized. My work commitment provided a convenient reason for us to separate until his scheduled departure, sparing him the need to maintain his performance continuously throughout the morning. We retreated to our respective home offices, Drew to finalize his preparations for Newport, me to continue documenting our assets and communicating with Vanessa about the day's surveillance plan. At 11, my phone buzzed with a message. OP arrived at Weston, room 1214. Olivia had arrived at their meeting point, right on schedule. Soon, Drew would manufacture a reason to leave our house, supposedly for his business meeting, but actually to meet her before their drive to Newport. At 12:30, Drew appeared in the doorway of my office, dressed in business casual attire, appropriate for his fictional meeting and for a weekend getaway. "I'm going to head out soon," he announced. "The softcore team wants to review some documents before the formal meeting." "Of course," I replied, looking up from my laptop. "Good luck with the negotiations." "Thanks." He approached my desk, leaning down to kiss me. "I'll text when we wrap up. Should be back by 6, then we'll head up to the lake." "I'll be ready," I assured him, maintaining eye contact, wondering if he detected any change in my demeanor, any indication that I knew the lake house plan was entirely fictional. "Great. And Becca?" he added from the doorway. "Don't work too hard today. It's still our anniversary." "I won't," I promised. "The Anderson strategy is almost complete anyway." After he left, I moved to the front window, watching discreetly as he loaded a weekend bag into his BMW, packed for Newport, not for our supposed lake house trip. He glanced back at the house once before driving away, his expression unreadable from this distance. I waited until his car disappeared around the corner before texting Vanessa. "Subject has departed, heading your way." Her response was immediate. "Team in position. We'll update as events unfold." Now the waiting began, the careful documentation of Drew's movements as he enacted the final phase of his deception. I returned to my office, focusing on the Anderson proposal to occupy my mind during this strange liminal period. The work provided structure and purpose, a reminder that regardless of my personal upheaval, My professional identity remained intact. At 1:15, my phone buzzed with an update from Vanessa. Subject arrived at Weston, proceeding to room 1214. The rendezvous was underway. Drew had now officially begun spending our 10th anniversary with his mistress rather than his wife. Despite my preparation, despite knowing this was coming, the confirmation sent a wave of cold anger through me. Not jealousy exactly, but profound indignation at the calculated nature of his betrayal. I worked steadily through the afternoon, receiving periodic updates from Vanessa's team. 1:45 p.m. Subjects departing Weston, both carrying weekend bags. 2:10 p.m. Subjects in subject's vehicle, heading south, likely route to Newport. 2:35 p.m. Text message from subject to you. Meeting starting now. Update you when we wrap up. The last one provoked a bitter laugh. Drew was actually texting me from the road as he drove to Newport with Olivia, maintaining his fiction of a business meeting. The dedication to his deception was almost admirable in its thoroughness. At 3:30, Emma called. "How are you holding up?" she asked without preamble. "Surprisingly well," I replied, realizing it was true. He left for Newport with her about an hour ago. Sent me a text claiming his meeting was starting. "The nerve," Emma muttered. "What's your plan for the rest of the day?" Finishing the Anderson proposal ironically, then finalizing preparations for Monday's filing with Larry. "You shouldn't be alone in that house tonight," Emma insisted. "It's still your anniversary, regardless of his betrayal. Come stay with me. We'll open a bottle of that ridiculous expensive Bordeaux I've been saving and plan your glorious single future." The offer was tempting. The thought of spending the night alone in our home, surrounded by the artifacts of our shared life, held little appeal. "Maybe," I conceded. "Let me see how the afternoon unfolds. Vanessa's team is still tracking them." "Keep me posted," Emma said. "And Becca? I'm proud of how you're handling this. Not everyone would maintain such composure." After we disconnected, I received another update from Vanessa. "Subjects arriving at Newport Bay & Spa, checking in now." Attached was a photograph of Drew and Olivia entering the inn, his hand resting possessively at the small of her back, both smiling in apparent anticipation of their romantic weekend. The image should have been painful, but instead, it provided a strange closure, irrefutable confirmation that my marriage had been fundamentally compromised. I forwarded the photograph to Larry with a brief message. "Sufficient documentation?" His response came quickly. "Abundantly. We'll proceed with filing first thing Monday." The remainder of the afternoon passed in a blur of work and periodic updates from Vanessa's team. Drew and Olivia checked into their Harborview suite, walked along the Newport waterfront, and made dinner preparations for their evening at the mooring, all documented with timestamps and photographs. At 5:45, precisely when his fictional meeting should have been concluding, Drew texted again. "Wrapping up now. Good progress. Home by 6:30, then Lake House?" The continued performance was both impressive and disturbing. Even from Newport, with Olivia, he maintained the elaborate fiction of returning to me for our anniversary celebration. I replied with deliberate ambiguity, "Actually, something's come up. We should talk when you get home." His response took longer than usual, suggesting my deviation from the expected script had caused concern. "Everything okay? Should I head straight there?" "No emergency," I assured him, giving him permission to continue his weekend with Olivia. "Just a change of plans. We can discuss when you return." Let him wonder. Let him worry slightly about what might have come up during his absence. It was a small disruption to his carefully constructed narrative, but somehow satisfying nonetheless. By 7 o'clock, I had completed the Anderson strategy and packed an overnight bag. The decision to stay with Emma felt right, a symbolic departure from the home that had housed so much deception. As I prepared to leave, my phone buzzed with one final update from Vanessa. Subjects at dinner. The mooring, waterfront table for 2. Anniversary champagne ordered. The attached photograph showed Drew raising a champagne flute across the table from Olivia, the Newport harbor visible through the restaurant window behind them. On his wrist, clearly visible, was the Omega Seamaster I had given him this morning, now being displayed during his anniversary dinner with another woman. That detail, more than anything else, crystallized my resolve. The watch had been a thoughtful gift, selected with genuine affection despite my growing suspicions. For Drew to wear it tonight with Olivia transformed it from a symbol of shared history to an emblem of his duplicity. I texted Emma, "On my way. Bring out that Bordeaux." Then I set my house keys on the kitchen counter beside the anniversary flowers Drew had arranged to have delivered this morning. Monday would bring legal filings, asset freezes, and the formal dismantling of our marriage. But tonight, our actual anniversary, marked my personal acknowledgement that our partnership had already ended. Not with today's final betrayal, but with the first instance of Drew's fundamental dishonesty, whenever that had occurred. As I drove to Emma's apartment, the diamond pendant Drew had given me caught the early evening light, glinting in the rearview mirror. Another beautiful object tainted by the circumstances of its giving. Monday morning arrived with the clarity that follows a storm. I dressed with deliberate care for the Anderson meeting, selecting a tailored navy suit that projected both confidence and authority. The diamond pendant Drew had given me for our anniversary remained in its velvet box on Emma's dresser, a beautiful object now tainted by the circumstances of its giving. "Good luck today," Emma said as I gathered my portfolio. "With everything." "One step at a time," I replied, echoing her advice from the previous evening. First the Andersons, then the legal proceedings. The familiar rhythm of professional preparation steadied me as I drove to Hamilton Investment Partners. Despite the emotional upheaval of recent days, my focus on the Anderson presentation remained sharp. This ability to compartmentalize had always been one of my strengths, though I'd never been tested quite so dramatically before. The Hamilton building gleamed in the morning sunlight, its glass and steel facade reflecting the clear October sky. I greeted the security guard, took the elevator to our floor, and found Jonathan already waiting in the conference room, reviewing documents with Claire. "Rebecca," he smiled warmly, though his eyes held a hint of concern. "All set?" "Absolutely," I assured him, arranging my materials at the head of the table. The Anderson expansion offers some unique opportunities in the current market. Jonathan nodded, his expression relaxing somewhat. "They're on their way up now, and Rebecca." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Whatever else is happening today, know that you have my complete confidence in this presentation." "Thank you," I said, genuinely touched by his support. "That means a great deal." The Andersons arrived precisely at 9, Richard imposing in his custom suit, Eleanor elegantly understated in cashmere and pearls. At 72 and 68, respectively, they represented old Boston money with a surprisingly progressive approach to investment strategy. One of the reasons we'd worked so well together over the years. "Rebecca?" Eleanor greeted me warmly, clasping my hand in both of hers. "You're looking well. How was your anniversary weekend?" The question caught me off guard momentarily. I'd mentioned our upcoming anniversary during our last meeting 3 weeks ago, when Eleanor had shared the story of their own 50th celebration. The irony of her innocent inquiry felt almost surreal given recent events. "It was illuminating," I replied diplomatically. "But let's focus on your portfolio expansion. I'm excited about the opportunities we've identified." For the next 90 minutes, I led them through the comprehensive strategy I developed, a balanced approach emphasizing sustainable growth with targeted higher yield components. The presentation flowed smoothly, my command of the material absolute despite the personal turmoil swirling just beneath the surface. "Impressive as always," Richard commented as I concluded. "You've addressed every concern we had about market volatility. And I particularly appreciate the emphasis on emerging sustainable technologies," Eleanor added. "Our grandchildren are quite vocal about responsible investing." Jonathan beamed from his position at the side of the room. "Rebecca has a remarkable talent for aligning investment strategies with clients' values while maintaining optimal performance." The meeting concluded with handshakes, the formal transfer paperwork signed, and a clear timeline established for implementation. As the Andersons departed with Jonathan escorting them to the elevator, Claire approached with a discreet message. "Your attorney called. He asked that you contact him as soon as you're available." Larry, the divorce filing. The next phase was beginning. "Thank you, Claire. I'll call him now." I retreated to my office, closing the door before dialing Larry's number. He answered immediately, his tone professionally brisk. "The petition has been filed," he informed me without preamble. "Judge Cahill assigned to the case temporary orders granted as requested, including the continued asset freeze, exclusive use of the marital residence for you pending further hearings, and restricted communication through counsel only." The process server? "En route to your home address now. According to our information, your husband is still there." I glanced at my watch, 10:45 a.m. "And the Cayman account?" "International freeze request submitted through appropriate channels. It will take longer to implement than the domestic accounts, but the paperwork is in motion." I nodded, though he couldn't see me. "What happens after service is complete?" "Your husband will have 20 days to file a response through counsel. Given the circumstances and evidence, I expect he'll move quickly. My guess is he already contacted an attorney after your conversation yesterday." "And in the meantime?" "In the meantime, you're protected by the temporary orders. You can return to the marital residence with a security escort if you wish to collect additional belongings. Your husband is required to vacate the property within 24 hours of service." The reality of what was happening settled over me. The legal machinery dismantling 10 years of marriage with clinical efficiency. Despite the emotionless language of petitions and temporary orders, this represented the formal end of the relationship that had shaped my adult life. "Rebecca?" Larry prompted gently when I didn't immediately respond. "Are you still there?" "Yes," I assured him. "Just processing. When will I know that service has been completed?" "The process server will call my office immediately. I'll notify you as soon as it's done." "Thank you, Larry." After we disconnected, I remained at my desk, staring out at the Boston skyline. The Anderson meeting had gone perfectly. Another step toward partnership, a professional triumph on the EI. Same day my personal life was being formally dissolved by legal proceedings. The contrast felt symbolic somehow. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. Jonathan stood in the doorway, his expression conveying both approval and concern. "Brilliant work with the Andersons," he began. "Richard mentioned partnership track specifically before they left. Said, and I quote, 'That young woman should be making decisions at the highest level of your organization.' That's gratifying to hear," I acknowledged. Jonathan entered fully, closing the door behind him. "I don't mean to pry, but is everything proceeding as expected with your other matter today?" "Yes," I confirmed. "The filing is complete. Service is in process." He nodded, seemingly relieved that I'd understood his delicate inquiry. "If you need time away or flexibility in your schedule during this period..." "Thank you, but work is actually stabilizing right now," I told him honestly. "The structure and focus are helpful." "I understand that impulse," he said quietly. "Just don't forget that compartmentalization, while useful professionally, has its limits personally." The observation echoed Emma's concerns about my emotional processing. Perhaps they were right. At some point, I would need to fully experience the grief and anger I'd been strategically deferring. "I'll keep that in mind," I promised. My phone buzzed with an incoming text from Vanessa. "Service completed 11:06 a.m. Subject received documents personally." So it was done. The divorce petition had been placed directly into Drew's hands, the legal dissolution of our marriage now officially underway. I forwarded the message to Larry with a brief note. "Confirmed service. Next steps?" His response came quickly. 24-hour clock for vacating residence now running. Security service standing by if you wish to retrieve personal items this afternoon. I considered this option. The temporary orders granted me exclusive use of our home pending further hearings, meaning I could return there immediately if I wished. Drew would be required to leave by tomorrow morning. Did I want to be present as he processed the reality of the divorce filing? Would confronting him directly serve any purpose now that the legal machinery was in motion? Before I could decide, my phone rang with Drew's distinctive tone, his first attempt to contact me since last night's conversation and this morning's service. I let it go to voicemail, remembering Larry's advice that all communication should now go through counsel. Seconds later, a text appeared. "Becca, please. I've just been served with divorce papers. We need to talk about this. Don't let lawyers destroy what we've built." Followed immediately by another. "I know I made terrible mistakes, but this isn't the way to handle it. Just give me a chance to explain. Please call me." I forwarded both messages to Larry without responding directly to Drew. His attempt to bypass the communication restrictions established by the temporary orders was predictable but still concerning. Larry's response was immediate. "Do not engage. I'll have my office send a formal reminder to Mr. Wilson that communication must go through counsel only. Has he retained an attorney yet?" "Unknown," I replied. No legal representative identified in his messages. I turned my attention back to work, focusing on the implementation timeline for the Anderson expansion. The methodical process of investment allocation and market analysis provided welcome structure as my phone continued to buzz with Drew's increasingly desperate attempts to make contact. At noon, Claire appeared with a concerned expression. "Rebecca, there's a situation at reception. Your husband is here insisting on seeing you. Security has been alerted, but I thought you should know immediately." My stomach tightened. Drew had escalated beyond calls and texts to physical presence, directly violating the temporary order's communication restrictions. "Has security responded?" "They're with him now, explaining that he needs to leave the building. He's quite insistent." I took a deep breath, considering my options. Continuing to avoid direct contact was the prudent legal approach, but Drew's appearance at my workplace indicated an escalation that might not be resolved without some form of direct intervention. "Tell security I'll speak with him briefly in the lobby," I decided. "Public space. Their presence required throughout." "Are you sure?" Claire asked, her concern evident. "You don't have to see him." "I know," I assured her. "But his presence here affects Hamilton as well as me personally. A brief controlled interaction might prevent further disruption." I texted Larry quickly. "Drew at my office. Speaking briefly in lobby with security present to prevent workplace disruption." His response came as I walked toward the elevator. "Keep it brief. No discussions of case specifics. Remind him communication restriction is legally binding." The elevator doors opened onto the marble-floored lobby of Hamilton Investment Partners. Drew stood near the reception desk, his appearance startlingly disheveled compared to his usual meticulous presentation. His hair was uncombed, his shirt wrinkled, his expression a mixture of desperation and anger. Two security officers flanked him discreetly but attentively. I approached with deliberate calm, stopping several feet away. Close enough for conversation, far enough for comfort. "Rebecca," he began immediately, taking a step toward me before security subtly moved to maintain the distance. "Thank God. These people wouldn't let me up to your office." They were following protocol, I replied evenly. Drew, you shouldn't be here. The temporary orders specifically restrict direct communication. Orders drafted by lawyers who don't know us, he countered, his voice rising slightly. 10 years, Becca. 10 years can't be dismissed with legal paperwork. Those 10 years included 7 months of a systematic affair and offshore accounts designed to hide marital assets, I pointed out, keeping my tone measured despite the public setting. The orders aren't dismissing our history, they're addressing your actions. His expression shifted, anger giving way momentarily to something like shame before hardening again. I made mistakes, serious ones, but rushing into divorce without even a conversation about what happened, that's not the Becca I know. The Becca you knew didn't have all the information, I countered. Now I do. Let me explain, he pleaded, lowering his voice. Not here, obviously. Dinner tonight. Neutral location. Just give me that much. I shook my head. Any discussion needs to happen through our respective attorneys. Have you retained counsel yet? I don't want lawyers speaking for me, Drew insisted, frustration evident in his tone. This is between us, Becca, husband and wife. That's no longer how this works, I told him firmly. The temporary orders are legally binding, Drew. Your presence here violates them. If you wish to communicate with me, it must be through counsel. He ran a hand through his already disheveled hair, his composure slipping further. So that's it? 10 years ends with paperwork and legal restrictions? Without even hearing my side? I saw your side, I replied quietly. In Newport, on our anniversary, with Olivia. The words landed like physical blows. Drew flinched, then glanced around the lobby, suddenly aware of our semi-public setting. She doesn't know, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. About you, about any of it. I told her I had a family emergency when the cards were declined. The confirmation of Vanessa's assessment that Olivia was unaware of Drew's marital status didn't surprise me, but it did deepen my sense of his fundamental dishonesty. Not one relationship with truth at its core, but 2 relationships built on elaborate fictions. That's between you and her, I said neutrally. My concern is the legal proceedings and the temporary orders, which you're currently violating. I need you to leave, Drew. And the house? The papers say I have to vacate within 24 hours. That's correct. His expression hardened. Where am I supposed to go? Perhaps the apartment you've been maintaining for meetings with Olivia, I suggested, unable to keep the edge from my voice. Or the downtown Weston you seem to favor. Drew's face flushed with anger or embarrassment, perhaps both. You've been having me followed, documenting everything, planning this for days while pretending everything was normal. Yes, I acknowledged simply. I needed accurate information to make informed decisions. He stared at me, seemingly seeing me clearly for the first time since his arrival. I never thought you could be this cold, this calculating. And I never thought you could maintain elaborate parallel lives for months on end, I countered. We've both discovered new capacities in ourselves, it seems. One of the security officers stepped forward discreetly. Ms. Wilson, Mr. Wilson, I need to remind you that this is a place of business. This conversation needs to conclude. Drew straightened his shoulders, making a visible effort to regain composure. I'll leave. But Becca... His voice softened slightly. This isn't over. These papers, these restrictions, they're just the opening move. There's more to discuss than lawyers can handle. Then retain counsel to represent your interests, I advised, maintaining my professional demeanor despite the emotional undercurrents. All communication through proper channels from this point forward. He looked at me for a long moment, searching my face for something, weakness, perhaps, or the emotional vulnerability that might give him an opening for manipulation. Finding none, he finally nodded curtly. You'll be hearing from my attorney, he said, his tone shifting to something harder, more businesslike. Gerald Hoffman. Larry Cohen knows him. Gerald Hoffman, Boston's most aggressive divorce attorney, known for scorched earth tactics and substantial fees. The choice said everything about how Drew intended to proceed now that his initial attempts at emotional reconciliation had failed. I'm sure Larry will be in touch with Mr. Hoffman once he's formally notified of representation, I replied evenly. Goodbye, Drew. I turned and walked toward the elevator without waiting for his response, hyper-conscious of his gaze on my back, but refusing to show any hesitation. The security officers would ensure he left the building. My part in this uncomfortable encounter was concluded. Back in my office, I immediately texted Larry. Brief interaction complete. Drew indicated Gerald Hoffman will represent him. Larry's aye. Response came quickly. Hoffman is aggressive, but predictable. This development suggests your husband is moving from reconciliation attempts to adversarial positioning. Implications: prepare for aggressive financial discovery demands and possible counterclaims. Hoffman specializes in muddying clear cases with tangential issues. I considered this assessment, unsurprised but still disappointed. Despite the overwhelming evidence of Drew's infidelity and financial misconduct, he was choosing the most combative possible approach to the divorce proceedings. Next steps? I texted. Document retrieval from marital residence advisable before 24-hour FAO. Vacate window expires. Secure personal items, financial records, anything with sentimental or evidentiary value. Security escort recommended given current tension level. The suggestion made sense. While the temporary orders granted me exclusive use of our home, retrieving essential items now, while Drew was still processing the initial shock of service, seemed prudent. Waiting until he'd consulted with Hoffman might complicate access to important documents. Available this afternoon? I asked. Security team and my associate Miranda Chen can meet you at the residence at 3 p.m. if that works for your schedule. I checked my calendar. No client meetings, just internal work that could be rescheduled. Confirmed for 3 p.m. The remainder of the afternoon passed in a blur of professional activity. I briefed my team on the Anderson implementation timeline, reviewed quarterly performance metrics for several other key clients, and deliberately immersed myself in the familiar rhythm of investment management. At 2:30, I informed Claire that I'd be out of the office for the remainder of the day but available by phone if urgent matters arose. Her concerned expression suggested she'd heard about Drew's appearance in the lobby, but she simply nodded without prying. The Anderson implementation documents are ready for your review tomorrow, she said, maintaining our professional focus. And Jonathan mentioned the quarterly leadership meeting has been moved to Thursday. Thank you, Claire, I replied, grateful for her discretion and efficiency. I'll be in early tomorrow to review the Anderson materials. I drove to our Beacon Hill brownstone with a strange sense of emotional distance, as if visiting a property I was considering purchasing rather than returning to the home I'd shared with Drew for 5 years. The security company's unmarked vehicle was already parked outside when I arrived, 2 professional-looking men standing beside it. Larry's associate, Miranda Chen, pulled up moments later, emerging from her car with a tablet and several empty banker's boxes. Young but with the confident bearing of someone who knew her business, she greeted me with a firm handshake. Ms. Wilson, I've prepared an inventory worksheet for systematic documentation of items removed today. The temporary orders grant you access to all areas of the marital residence, but we should focus on personal documents, financial records, and irreplaceable personal items in this initial retrieval. I appreciated her methodical approach, so aligned with my own preferred way of handling complex situations. Is there any indication that my husband has returned to the property since this morning's service? One of the security team members stepped forward. No activity detected since we began monitoring at noon, ma'am. The house appears unoccupied currently. That was a relief. While I was entitled to enter regardless of Drew's presence, avoiding Another direct confrontation seemed preferable given the tension of our earlier interaction. I unlocked the front door, the familiar scent of the house, lemon furniture polish, the subtle fragrance of the roses Drew had sent Friday morning, creating a momentary dissonance. How could everything look so normal, so unchanged, when the foundation of the life represented by these rooms had been completely dismantled? "Where would you like to begin?" Miranda asked, bringing me back to the task at hand. "My home office first," I decided. Then financial records in the den, followed by personal items from the master bedroom and closet. We moved through the Yachiu house with efficient purpose, Miranda documenting each item as the security team carried boxes to my car. My home office contained relatively few essential documents. Most of my professional life resided at Hamilton, but I collected the external hard drive containing personal photographs, tax records, and several family heirlooms that decorated the space. The den proved more critical, housing our shared financial records, property documents, and investment portfolios. I methodically gathered everything that might have relevance to the divorce proceedings or value for my personal records, noting several folders that appeared to have been recently disturbed. Likely Drew searching for documents after yesterday's confrontation. "Ms. Wilson," Miranda said quietly as we worked, "your prenuptial agreement. Do you have the original copy?" "In the safe upstairs," I told her, "along with other important documents and some family jewelry." She nodded. "That should be our next priority then. Original documents carry significant weight in proceedings." The master bedroom felt more emotionally charged than the other spaces. The California king bed still unmade from Drew's hasty departure yesterday, his side of the closet showing signs of rapid packing with several drawers left partially open. I focused on my own closet space, selecting essential clothing items and the small safe tucked at the back of my side. The safe contained what I'd expected: the original prenuptial agreement, my grandmother's jewelry collection, passports, birth certificates, and various insurance policies, all intact, suggesting Drew hadn't attempted to access these items despite his evident search through other documents. As I gathered toiletries from the master bathroom, I noticed Drew's expensive electric razor still on the counter, along with his collection of watches displayed in their specialized case, all except the vintage Omega Seamaster I'd given him for our anniversary, which he'd presumably taken to Newport. The sight of these personal items, these traces of daily intimacy now rendered meaningless, triggered the first real emotional response I'd allowed myself since beginning the methodical process of legal separation. A tightness in my chest, a burning behind my eyes, a momentary inability to continue the inventory process. Miranda noticed my hesitation. "Take your time, Ms. Wilson. This process is necessarily difficult." I nodded, appreciating her understanding without condescension. "It's just strange," seeing evidence of our shared life while simultaneously dismantling it. "Perfectly natural response," she assured me. "The emotional and legal aspects of divorce often progress at different rates. The important thing today is securing what you need for both practical and personal reasons." We continued through the house, completing the inventory of essential items by 4:30. The security team had loaded several boxes into my car, with additional items documented but left in place for future retrieval once I'd secured new permanent housing. As we prepared to leave, I found myself standing in the entryway, looking back at the home Drew and I had created together. The antique console table we'd found at a market in Provence during our 5th anniversary trip. The framed black and white photographs documenting our travels. The carefully curated art collection we'd built piece by piece over the years. All of it beautiful, tasteful, expensive, and now revealed as merely the elaborate stage setting for a marriage that had been fundamentally compromised for much of its existence. "Is there anything else you need today, Ms. Wilson?" Miranda asked gently. I shook my head. "No, this is sufficient for now. The rest can wait until the temporary orders are fully implemented and new living arrangements established." As we stepped outside, A BMW pulled up sharply at the curb. Drew's car, with Drew himself emerging, his expression darkening as he registered the security team and Miranda's professional presence alongside me. "What's happening here?" he demanded, approaching rapidly until one of the security officers stepped forward to establish a perimeter. "Authorized retrieval of personal effects under the temporary orders," Miranda replied smoothly, her tablet displaying the relevant documentation. "Ms. Wilson is exercising her right to access the marital residence and secure personal property." Drew's gaze shifted to me. "Couldn't even wait until I'd had time to process the papers before sending in your legal team to clean the place out." "I'm retrieving essential personal and financial documents," I corrected him. "Nothing that affects the overall asset division outlined in the temporary orders." He glanced at the boxes visible in my car. "And I'm just supposed to trust that? After you've spent days investigating me, freezing accounts, and planning this ambush?" "A full inventory has been documented," Miranda interjected professionally. "Copies will be provided to your counsel once formal representation is established. Mr. Hoffman, I believe?" Drew's jaw tightened at this evidence that his choice of attorney was already known. "This isn't necessary, Becca," he said, ignoring Miranda to address me directly. "All this legal maneuvering, security teams, formal documentation, we could resolve this privately, reasonably." "We're well beyond that point," I replied evenly. "You've been served with formal divorce papers and temporary orders that clearly outline the next steps. I suggest you focus on securing representation and complying with the 24-hour vacate requirement." "You're really going through with this," he said, his tone a mixture of disbelief and anger. 10 years, and you won't even consider alternatives to immediate divorce." "The alternatives ended when you chose to spend our anniversary with Olivia in Newport," I told him quietly. "Or perhaps earlier, when you began diverting funds offshore or established a separate apartment for your affair. Each of those decisions represented an alternative path that you selected without my knowledge or consent." Drew ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in every line of his body. "People make mistakes, Becca. Marriages survive infidelity all the time." "Some do," I acknowledged, "but that requires honesty, remorse, and the absence of systematic, long-term deception. You maintained parallel lives for at least 7 months, Drew. That's not a mistake. It's a sustained campaign of deliberate choices." "Sir?" One of the security officers intervened. "This conversation is not productive. I need to ask you to step back and allow Ms. Wilson to depart." Drew looked from the officer to me, then to Miranda and the boxes in my car. Something in his expression shifted, hardened, as if he were recalibrating his approach based on the reality before him. "Fine," he said finally. "If this is how you want to proceed, through lawyers and court orders and security teams, then that's what we'll do. But remember, Rebecca, you chose this approach. Whatever happens next is a result of that choice." The implied threat hung in the air between us, not specific enough to constitute legal intimidation, but clearly intended to unsettle me. I met his gaze steadily, refusing to show any reaction to his attempt at emotional leverage. "I'll have my remaining personal items removed by 9 tomorrow morning," he continued, his tone now coldly professional. "The house will be vacated as required by the court order." "Thank you," I replied with equal formality. "Any further communication should go through Mr. Hoffman once he formally notifies us of representation." I moved toward my car, the security team maintaining position between Drew and me as I slipped behind the wheel. As I drove away, I caught a final glimpse of him in the rearview mirror, standing on the sidewalk before our beautiful brownstone, watching my departure with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. The drive to Emma's apartment passed in a haze of complex emotions, finally breaking through the strategic focus I'd maintained throughout the day. By the time I parked, tears were streaming silently down my face. Not dramatic sobs, but the quiet release of tension, grief, and something like relief all mingled together. Emma was waiting when I arrived, immediately helping with the boxes without comment on my evident emotional state. Only when everything had been brought inside did she pull me into a tight hug. "You did it," she said softly. "The hardest parts are behind you now." "Are they?" I asked, my voice steadier than I expected. "Drew's retained Gerald Hoffman. Larry says to expect aggressive tactics. Legal maneuvering is different from personal confrontation," Emma pointed out, leading me to the couch and pouring wine for both of us. "The emotional terrain has been crossed. Now it's about process and procedure, your natural habitat." I smiled weakly at her characterization. There was nothing natural about seeing our home as a collection of assets to be documented and divided. "I know," she acknowledged, her expression softening with sympathy. "But you got through it. The filing is complete, the temporary orders in place, essential items secured. You've created the foundation for whatever comes next." "Which is what, exactly?" I wondered aloud. "The professional part is clear, the Anderson implementation, the path to partnership. But personally?" Emma considered this thoughtfully. "Healing, learning to trust again, eventually. Rebuilding a life without the fictions Drew created around you." The simplicity and truth of her assessment resonated deeply. Whatever tactical battles lay ahead in the divorce proceedings, the essential work was indeed personal reconstruction, separating my authentic self from the role I'd played. In Drew's elaborate deception. "One day at a time," I said finally, raising my wine glass in a small toast. "Starting with implementing the Anderson strategy tomorrow." "That's my pragmatic sister," Emma smiled, "always with a clear next step." As evening settled around us, we left the boxes unopened, a task for another day when emotional reserves were higher. Instead, we ordered Thai food, watched a mindless comedy neither of us fully followed, and maintained the gentle, supportive silence that had characterized our relationship since childhood. Before bed, I checked my email one last time to find a message from Larry. "Hoffman made contact late afternoon. Formal representation letter attached. Initial settlement conference requested within 2 weeks. Details to follow tomorrow." In the meantime, excellent work today navigating difficult circumstances. So the legal machinery continued its inexorable progress. Drew had moved from denial and attempted reconciliation to formal representation by Boston's most aggressive divorce attorney. The battle lines were being drawn, the strategies formulated on both sides. Yet somehow, in the quiet of Emma's guest room, surrounded by boxes containing the essential documentation of my married life, I felt a strange sense of peace. The worst deceptions had been uncovered, the initial shock absorbed, the first concrete steps toward dissolution completed. Whatever came next, settlement conferences, financial disclosures, possibly even court appearances, I would face with the same methodical determination that had served me well throughout this tumultuous week. Drew had constructed elaborate fictions around our marriage. I would dismantle them with truth, evidence, and the unwavering clarity that had emerged from discovering his betrayal. My grandmother's vintage watches, now safely retrieved from our home, had always carried her favorite saying engraved on their backs: "Time reveals truth." How right she had been. Time had indeed revealed the truth about my marriage, painful as that revelation had been. Now time would carry me forward, beyond this betrayal, into whatever authentic future awaited. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.